"Mama, that man is shaking. Can we help him?" Keandra looked down at her son, then at the old man hunched over on the bus stop bench. December rain was coming down sideways in Baltimore, and the man's thin jacket was soaked through. His whole body trembled. She didn't think twice. She pulled off her coat, the only one she owned, walked over and wrapped it around his shoulders. Her hands shook the moment she let go. Now she was the one freezing, but she smiled at him anyway. "Stay warm, sir. Nobody should be out here like this." The old man looked up at her, tears in his eyes. He whispered, "God bless you, miss." That coat cost her $12 at a thrift store, but the man wearing it now owned a hospital worth $400 million, and in 72 hours, Keandra's son would need that hospital to survive.
Join me as we dive into this powerful story. But before we do, I started this channel because I believe stories like these need to be heard. Stories about real kindness, real struggle, and the moments that remind us we're all connected. If you believe that too, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone who needs it today. Let's build something meaningful together. Now, let's get back to Keandra and the decision that changed everything.
But Clarence Drummond was no ordinary old man, and that bus stop bench was the last place anyone would expect to find him. 2 hours earlier, Clarence had been sitting at the head of a mahogany conference table on the 14th floor of Drummond Medical Center, the hospital he built, the hospital with his name carved into the stone above the front entrance. 40 years ago, he'd started it with nothing but a small loan, a medical degree, and a promise he made to his dying mother. She'd passed from a heart condition that could have been treated if the family had money. They didn't, and Clarence swore that no child, no family would ever go through what his family went through. Not if he could help it. Drummond Medical Center grew into one of the top cardiac hospitals in the entire Mid-Atlantic region, a $400 million institution. Clarence had poured his life into it. Every hallway, every operating room, every policy that said, no child gets turned away. But tonight, the board wanted to sell. Medvance Health Group, a massive corporate chain out of Chicago, had put an offer on the table. The numbers were staggering. The board members sat there with dollar signs in their eyes talking about shareholder returns and market valuation. Like the hospital was a stock ticker instead of a place where children's lives were saved. And the voice pushing hardest for the sale, it belonged to his own son. "Dad, this is business," Denzel had said, leaning forward in his chair. "Medvance is offering 3 times the current valuation. We'd be foolish to walk away from that." Clarence had looked at his son, 42 years old, brilliant surgeon, top of his class at Johns Hopkins. But somewhere along the way, Denzel had stopped seeing patients and started seeing numbers. This hospital was built to serve people, Denzel, not to be flipped like a piece of real estate. And it has served people for 40 years. But the world has changed, Dad. Healthcare is a business now. You can't run a hospital on idealism. The room had gone quiet. 8 board members, not one of them spoke up for Clarence, not one. He'd stood up slowly, looked around the table at the faces he'd trusted for decades. Then he said very quietly, "This hospital will not be sold. Not while I'm alive." And he walked out. He didn't call his driver, didn't take the elevator to the parking garage where his black Cadillac sat waiting. He just walked, straight out the front doors into the December rain, down Lombard Street, past the Inner Harbor, through the wet, empty blocks of downtown Baltimore. The rain soaked through his wool suit jacket in minutes. His $800 Italian shoes squished in the puddles. His white hair was plastered flat against his head. But he kept walking, because the cold outside was nothing compared to what he felt inside. Betrayed by his own son, by the people he'd trusted to protect what he built. He ended up at a bus stop on Eastern Avenue, an old metal bench with a cracked plastic roof that did almost nothing to block the wind. He sat down heavily. His hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. He was 74 years old. exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. To anyone walking by, he looked like just another homeless man trying to survive another freezing night in Baltimore. His soaked clothes hung heavy on his frame. Rain dripped from his chin. His shoulders were hunched against the wind. And that's exactly how Keandra found him. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand who Keandra Carter was. Because when she gave that old man her coat, she wasn't just being kind. She was being herself. And her story is just as important as his. Keandra was 31 years old. She worked 2 jobs. Monday through Friday, she cleaned rooms at the Harborview Inn near the waterfront. Check-out at noon meant 12 rooms stripped, scrubbed, and reset before 3 o'clock. Then she'd take the number 7 bus across town to Mama T's Kitchen, a small soul food restaurant on North Avenue, where she waited tables from 5 o'clock until close. On a good night, she made about $40 in tips. On a bad night, less than 20. She lived in a studio apartment on East Baltimore Street with her 7-year-old son, Malachi. The apartment was small. 1 room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with a shower that only ran hot for about 6 minutes. But it was theirs. And Keandra kept it spotless. Malachi was the center of her universe, a bright, curious, talkative boy with a wide smile and eyes that never stopped moving. He loved drawing. He loved asking questions about everything. He loved pretending to be a superhero. But Malachi was also sick. He'd been born with a condition called tetralogy of Fallot, a congenital heart defect, 4 problems with the heart all at once. His doctor at the free clinic had explained it to Keandra when Malachi was just 3 months old. She still remembered every word. This condition affects about 1 in every 2,500 babies born in America, Miss Carter. Malachi's heart has a hole between the 2 lower chambers, and the valve leading to his lungs is too narrow. His blood isn't getting enough oxygen. That's why his lips turn blue sometimes. He'll need surgery, open-heart surgery, ideally before he turns 8. Malachi was 7 now, and his 8th birthday was 4 months away. The surgery would cost somewhere between $180,000 and $250,000. Keandra's Medicaid covered part of it, but not nearly enough. She was still short more than $80,000. She'd called every number she could find, applied to every program, filled out every form, but the waiting lists were long, the approvals were slow, and the clock was ticking. That night, the night of the coat, Keandra had just finished her shift at Mama T's. She'd picked up Malachi from her mother, Rashida's, house in Park Heights. Rashida watched him every evening while Keandra worked, feeding him dinner, helping him with his homework, making sure he took his heart medication at exactly 7:30. Keandra counted her tips on the bus ride to her mother's house. $23.50. She folded the bills carefully into her wallet and checked her phone. No missed calls from the hospital. No emails about financial assistance. Nothing. Malachi was asleep on Rashida's couch when she got there. She carried him to the bus stop, his head heavy on her shoulder. He woke up halfway there, groggy but alert the way kids do. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, baby. Bus is coming soon." That's when Malachi spotted the old man on the bench, shaking, soaked, alone. And Malachi tugged on Keandra's sleeve and said the words that started everything.
Now here's what happened next, and I need you to pay close attention, because this moment, this small, ordinary moment at a bus stop in the rain, it was about to set off a chain of events that neither Keandra nor Clarence could have imagined.
Malachi pulled away from his mother and walked right up to the old man. No hesitation, no fear. Just a 7-year-old boy with a broken heart, literally, walking toward a stranger because he saw someone who needed help. "Are you cold, sir?" Malachi asked. His voice was small but steady. "My mama says nobody should be cold if we can help it." Clarence looked up, and the first thing he noticed wasn't the boy's words. It was his lips. They had a faint bluish tint, a cyanotic shade that most people would never notice. But Clarence had spent 40 years building a cardiac hospital. He'd seen that color 1,000 times. He knew exactly what it meant. This child had a heart condition, but the boy was smiling, wide and warm, like the cold didn't bother him at all, like helping a stranger mattered more than his own discomfort. Before Clarence could respond, Keandra stepped forward. She was already pulling off her coat, a thin brown parka, worn at the elbows with a zipper that stuck halfway up. She draped it over Clarence's shoulders carefully, the way you'd cover a sleeping child. "Oh no, miss," Clarence said, his voice weak from the cold. "I can't take your coat. You need it." Keandra shook her head. "I've survived worse than a little rain, sir. You need it more than I do right now." Her hands trembled as she pulled them back. Now she was the one standing in the freezing rain with nothing but a thin restaurant uniform. But she didn't flinch. She just stood there, rubbing Malachi's shoulders to keep him warm, and smiled at the old man like giving away her only coat was the most natural thing in the world. Clarence looked at her. Really looked at her. She was young, tired, the kind of tired that goes deeper than one long day. The kind that settles into your bones from months and years of not having enough. But her eyes were warm, full of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine kindness. No calculation. No motive. Just one human being caring about another. "God bless you, miss," he whispered. Keandra nodded. "You stay warm, okay? There's a shelter on Monument Street, about 6 blocks north. They'll take you in tonight." Headlights appeared down the block, the number 7 bus rumbling toward them through the rain. Keandra scooped Malachi up and headed for the curb. "Bye, mister," Malachi called out, waving over his mother's shoulder. "I hope you get warm." The bus doors opened. They got on. The doors closed, and Clarence sat there alone on that bench, wearing a $12 coat that smelled like cooking oil and lavender shampoo. He pulled it tighter around his shoulders. It was thin. It was worn. It was the warmest thing he'd felt in years. For the first time that night, Clarence Drummond smiled. But he wasn't just smiling because of the coat. He was thinking about those blue lips, that little boy with the bright eyes and the broken heart, and the mother who gave away the only warmth she had because she saw someone who had less. Something shifted inside Clarence. Something he thought the board meeting had killed for good. Hope. He pulled out his phone, the one he always carried, but hadn't touched all evening, and made a single call. "Odessa, it's Clarence. I need you to look into something for me first thing tomorrow morning." A boy, about 7 years old. His mother called him Malachi. The next morning, Clarence was at his desk before sunrise. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that boy's face, those blue lips, that wide, fearless smile, and the mother who gave away her only coat, like it was nothing. At 6:15, he picked up his phone and called the one person he trusted more than anyone in the world. Odessa Monroe had been the head nurse at Drummond Medical Center for 28 years. She'd been there before the hospital had a second floor, before the parking garage, before the fancy lobby with the marble floors. She'd been there when it was just Clarence and a handful of doctors working out of a converted warehouse on Pratt Street, stitching together a dream with duct tape and determination. Odessa picked up on the second ring. "Clarence Drummond calling me before the sun is up. This better be important. I need you to look into something for me. A patient, a child. His name is Malachi, about 7 years old. His mother's name is Keandra. I think they might be in our system." Odessa was quiet for a moment. "This about last night. You sounded strange when you called." "Just look into it, Odessa, please." An hour later, Odessa called back, and what she told him made Clarence grip the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. Malachi Carter, 7 years old, tetralogy of Fallot. He was referred to us 4 months ago by his pediatrician at the East Baltimore Free Clinic. He was scheduled for a surgical consultation with the cardiac team in October. She paused. "It was canceled." Why? Financial. His mother has Medicaid, but it doesn't cover the full cost of the procedure. The billing department flagged the case. They required a deposit of $40,000 before they'd move forward with the consultation. She couldn't pay. Clarence closed his eyes. How many times did she call? 4 times. I pulled the phone records. She called 4 times over 6 weeks asking for an extension, asking if there was a payment plan, asking if there was any way at all. Every time she was told the same thing. Without the deposit, they couldn't schedule the surgery. Who told her that? The Financial Services Department, following standard protocol. Standard protocol, Clarence repeated. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Clarence, listen to me. Odessa's voice softened. This girl isn't some deadbeat. I looked at her file. She works 2 jobs. She applied to every assistance program in the state. CHIP, Mended Little Hearts, the Ronald McDonald House Fund. She even started one of those online fundraiser pages. She's raised $2,300 in 3 weeks. She needs $80,000 more. Clarence said nothing. You know what's happening out there, right? Odessa continued. 66% of bankruptcies in this country are tied to medical bills. This girl isn't lazy. She's drowning. And our hospital, your hospital, is holding her head under the water. That last sentence hit Clarence like a sledgehammer. His hospital. The hospital he built so that no child would ever be turned away. The hospital that had his mother's name on the pediatric wing. And it was turning away a 7-year-old boy with a broken heart because his mother couldn't write a check for $40,000. He sat there in his leather chair, surrounded by awards and framed photographs and 40 years of accomplishments. And he felt sick. Thank you, Odessa, he said quietly. I'll handle it. Clarence, what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but that boy is getting his surgery. That afternoon, Clarence called Denzel into his office. Not the boardroom, not a conference call, his private office, just the 2 of them. Denzel arrived in his white coat, stethoscope around his neck, looking like exactly what he was. A world-class cardiac surgeon, top 5 in the country for pediatric heart repair. Clarence had never been more proud of his son's hands or more disappointed in his heart. I need to ask you something, Clarence said. If a 7-year-old child needed heart surgery and his family couldn't afford it, what should we do? Denzel leaned back in his chair. That depends on the specifics. What's their insurance situation? Medicaid doesn't cover the full procedure. Family can't make the deposit. Then we refer them to the state assistance program. There's a wait list, but that's the appropriate channel. The wait list is 8 months long, Denzel. The child needs surgery now. Dad. Denzel's voice took on that careful, measured tone he used when he thought his father was being unreasonable. We can't absorb every case that falls through the cracks. The board is already reviewing our charity write-offs. If we start making exceptions, where does it end? It ends with a child being alive, Clarence said. That's emotional thinking, not strategic thinking. Clarence stared at his son. And for a moment, he didn't see the 42-year-old surgeon. He saw himself, 30 years younger, sitting in this very chair, telling his accountant that the numbers had to work, that they'd figure out the community programs later, that right now the priority was growth. He'd built the machine, and now the machine was running exactly the way he designed it. Efficient, profitable, and heartless. Clarence remembered the day Drummond Medical Center opened its doors. He'd stood on the front steps with Odessa beside him, a crowd of neighbors and community members filling the sidewalk, and he'd said, "This hospital will never turn away a child. Not today, not ever." He wondered when that promise had become just words on a wall. "You can go, Denzel," Clarence said quietly. Denzel stood up. At the door, he paused. "Dad, I know you care, but caring doesn't keep the lights on." After his son left, Clarence sat alone for a long time. Then he made a decision. He wouldn't use his money to fix this, not yet. He wouldn't pull rank or override the board. He needed Denzel to see what he had seen, to feel what he had felt on that bench in the rain. He needed his son to remember why he became a doctor in the first place. But first, he needed to see Keandra again. Meanwhile, across town, Keandra was fighting her own battle, and she was losing. It started at 7 o'clock in the morning, the day after she'd given her coat to the old man at the bus stop. She sat on the edge of her bed, with her phone in one hand and a list of numbers she'd written on the back of an envelope. First call, the Children's Health Insurance Program helpline. She'd already applied twice, both times denied, because her income was $600 over the threshold. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Based on your household income, you don't qualify for expanded coverage at this time." "But I can't afford the surgery without it. My son needs open heart surgery." "I understand, ma'am. I can transfer you to our appeals department. The current wait time for an appeal review is 12 to 16 weeks. 12 to 16 weeks? Malachi didn't have 12 to 16 weeks. Second call, Mended Little Hearts, a nonprofit that helps families with children who have congenital heart defects. The woman on the phone was kind, genuinely kind, but the answer was the same. "We have a grant program, but our current funding cycle is closed. Applications reopen in March. I can put you on the notification list." March was 3 months away. Third call, Ronald McDonald House. They could help with housing during the hospital stay, but not with the surgery cost itself. Fourth call, a medical debt assistance organization she'd found online at 2 o'clock in the morning. They asked her to fill out a 20-page application and said the review process takes 6 to 8 weeks. By noon, Keandra had made 11 calls, 11 different organizations, 11 different versions of the same answer. "Not right now, not yet. Fill out this form, get in this line, wait." She put the phone down and pressed her hands against her eyes. She would not cry, not during the day. Crying was for 2 o'clock in the morning when Malachi was asleep and couldn't hear. That afternoon, she picked Malachi up from school. Usually, he ran out the front door at full speed, backpack bouncing, shouting about his day before he even reached the car. Today, he walked slowly. His teacher, Ms. Tanya, was beside him, holding his hand. "He had a rough afternoon," Ms. Tanya said quietly. "He got winded during recess, had to sit out. He said his chest felt funny." Keandra knelt down in front of her son. His lips were darker than yesterday, that blue-purple tint that made her stomach drop every single time. "Hey, baby, how you feeling?" "I'm okay, Mama. Just tired." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can we go home?" That night, Keandra lay on the floor next to Malachi's bed, listening to him breathe. She counted each inhale, each exhale, the way she'd done every night for months. His breathing was faster than last week, shallower. She could hear it. At 9 o'clock, her mother called. "Mija, I've been thinking," Rashida said. "The house. I can sell the house. It's not worth much, but maybe 50,000–60,000. It's enough to get closer to what you need." "Mama, no, that house is everything you have. Malachi is everything I have. I'm not letting you sell your home. I'll figure this out. Keandra Marie Carter, you listen to me. You've been figuring this out alone for 7 years. Let me help." "I said no, Mama." Keandra's voice cracked. "Please, I'll find a way." Rashida was quiet. Then softly, "Okay, baby, but the offer stands always." After they hung up, Keandra sat at the kitchen table. It was past 2 o'clock in the morning. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rhythm of Malachi breathing in the next room. She spread out the hospital bills on the table. The numbers blurred through her tears. $2,300 raised on GoFundMe. 80,000 still needed, and time was running out. She put her head down on the table and cried, silently. the way she always did. Because Malachi could not hear his mother break, and she had no idea that the man she'd given her coat to was at that very moment planning something that would change everything. 3 days later, Clarence walked into Mama T's kitchen on North Avenue at 6:30 in the evening. He'd changed out of his usual suit. Instead, he wore a simple gray sweater, plain slacks, and a flat cap pulled low over his forehead. No watch, no cufflinks, nothing that would give him away. He looked like any retired man out for a quiet dinner. Odessa had told him where Keandra worked. He told himself he just wanted to see her one more time, to confirm what he already felt. But the truth was, he needed to. Something about that woman had gotten under his skin in a way nothing had in years. The restaurant was small, maybe 15 tables, half of them full. The smell of collard greens and fried chicken hit him the moment he walked in. It reminded him of his mother's kitchen. A lifetime ago. He sat at a corner table by the window and picked up the laminated menu. A moment later, Keandra appeared. She was wearing the restaurant's uniform, a plain black shirt and an apron tied at the waist. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired, the same bone-deep tired he'd noticed at the bus stop. But she was smiling. A real smile. The kind that costs effort when you're running on empty. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Mama T's. Can I get you something to drink?" Then she stopped. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God. You're the man from the bus stop, the one from the other night." Clarence smiled. "Guilty. Are you okay? Did you find somewhere warm that night? I was worried about you." "I'm fine, miss. Better than fine, actually. That coat of yours saved me." Keandra's face relaxed into relief. "I'm so glad. I kept thinking about you. My son asked about you too. He wanted to know if the shaking man got warm. Your son, the little one who came up to me first. That's Malachi. He's got a big heart." She paused. Something flickered across her face. "Biggest heart I know, even if it doesn't work quite right." Clarence leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Keandra hesitated. She wasn't the type to unload her problems on strangers. But something about this old man felt safe. Maybe because he'd been vulnerable in front of her first. Maybe because he reminded her of her grandfather. "He has a heart condition," she said quietly. "He was born with it. He needs surgery, but it's complicated. The cost is, well, it's a lot. We're working on it." "I'm sorry to hear that. He seemed like a strong boy." "He's the toughest kid I know." Her voice caught, just for a second. Then she straightened up and smiled again. "He just needs a chance. That's all. Just a chance." Clarence nodded slowly. "I believe he'll get one." They talked a little more while Keandra brought his food. She checked on him between other tables, always moving, always working. Clarence watched her. He noticed how she remembered every regular's name, how she refilled the sweet tea for the old couple in the corner without being asked, how she slipped an extra piece of cornbread onto the plate of an elderly woman eating alone. When a customer at table 4 snapped his fingers and complained that his food was cold, Keandra apologized warmly and had a fresh plate out in 4 minutes. No attitude, no eye roll, just grace under pressure. When Clarence finished his meal, he left a $100 bill folded under the edge of his plate. He stood up quietly, put on his cap, and headed for the door. He was halfway down the block when he heard footsteps behind him. Sir, wait!" Keandra caught up to him, slightly out of breath, holding the $100 bill. "I think you made a mistake. You left a $100 bill. Your meal was only $14. Clarence looked at her. This woman, who needed $80,000, who was drowning in medical debt, who probably hadn't bought herself anything in months, was chasing him down the street to return money she thought he'd left by accident. "It's not a mistake, sweetheart," he said gently. "You earned it." "Sir, I can't take this. It's too much." Then consider it a gift from a grateful old man who was cold and alone and who met someone kind enough to care. Keandra's eyes glistened. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She folded the bill carefully and held it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," Clarence said softly. "Take care of that boy. He's lucky to have you." He turned and walked away into the evening. Behind him, Keandra stood on the sidewalk watching him go, holding $100 like it was made of gold. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he owned the hospital that had turned her son away. She didn't know that what happened next would change her life forever. But Clarence knew, and he was just getting started. 1 week later, everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday, 11:15 in the morning. Malachi was sitting at his desk in Miss Tanya's second-grade classroom at Barclay Elementary, coloring a picture of a rocket ship, when he dropped his crayon. His hand went to his chest, his face went gray, and then he slid sideways off his chair and hit the floor. Miss Tanya screamed. 2 kids started crying. The school nurse was there in 90 seconds. She checked his pulse. It was racing, irregular. His lips were dark blue. His skin was cold and clammy. She called 911. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics loaded Malachi onto a stretcher. He was conscious, but barely. His eyes were open, glassy, unfocused. He kept whispering one word over and over. "Mama." The nearest hospital with a pediatric cardiac unit was Drummond Medical Center, 8 minutes away. The ambulance tore through the streets of East Baltimore with its sirens screaming. At 11:32, Keandra's phone rang. She was on the 4th floor of the Harbor View Inn, stripping sheets off a king-size bed. Room 412. She would remember that room number for the rest of her life. "Miss Carter, this is Principal Watkins at Barclay Elementary. Your son, Malachi, collapsed in class. An ambulance has taken him to Drummond Medical Center. You need to get there now." Keandra dropped the sheets. She didn't grab her bag. She didn't clock out. She didn't tell her supervisor. She just ran. Down the hallway, down 4 flights of stairs, out the front door of the hotel, into the cold December air. Still wearing her gray housekeeping uniform with the name tag pinned to her chest. She couldn't afford a cab. The bus would take 30 minutes, so she ran. 6 blocks to the number 7 bus stop. Caught the bus by seconds. Rode it for 12 agonizing minutes, then ran another 3 blocks from the bus stop to the hospital entrance. She burst through the emergency room doors at 12:08. Hair wild, chest heaving, eyes frantic. "My son, Malachi Carter. He was brought in by ambulance. Where is he?" A nurse led her down a long white hallway to the pediatric emergency unit. And there was Malachi, her baby, lying on a hospital bed that looked too big for his small body. Wires attached to his chest, an IV line in his arm, an oxygen mask over his face, monitors beeping in a steady mechanical rhythm. He looked so small, so fragile, like a leaf that the wind could carry away. Keandra grabbed his hand. It was cold. "Baby, I'm here. Mama's here." Malachi's eyes fluttered open. He tried to smile beneath the oxygen mask. His voice came out thin, barely a whisper. "Mama, don't cry. I'm okay." But he wasn't okay, and Keandra knew it. Dr. Patterson, the attending cardiologist, pulled Keandra into the hallway 10 minutes later. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a voice that was clearly practiced at delivering bad news, gently.
"Ms. Carter, your son's condition has deteriorated significantly. The tetralogy of Fallot that was diagnosed earlier, it involves 4 structural defects in his heart. The hole between his ventricles, the narrowing of his pulmonary valve, the thickened right ventricle, and the displaced aorta. All 4 of these problems are now creating a critical situation. His blood oxygen levels are dangerously low." "What does that mean?" Keandra asked, though she already knew.
It means he needs surgery, open heart surgery. We need to repair all 4 defects at once, and we need to do it within 48 hours. If we wait longer than that, the risk of cardiac arrest increases substantially. 48 hours. 2 days. That was all the time her son had left. The estimated cost of the procedure is approximately $220,000, Dr. Patterson continued. I know that's a significant number, and I want you to know that our financial services team can work with you on options. I'll sign anything, Keandra said immediately. I'll pay anything, whatever it takes. Just save my son. I understand. Let me connect you with our billing department. 20 minutes later, Keandra sat across from a woman in a beige blazer in a small office on the first floor. The woman had a computer screen in front of her and a practiced professional expression that held no warmth.
Ms. Carter, I've reviewed your insurance coverage. Your Medicaid plan covers a portion of the procedure, but there's a remaining balance of approximately $87,000. Without insurance approval or a deposit of at least $40,000, we're unable to schedule the surgery at this time.
At this time? Keandra's voice cracked. My son could die in 48 hours. What do you mean at this time? I understand your concern, and I'm sorry. But hospital policy requires financial clearance before we can proceed with elective surgical procedures. Elective? There is nothing elective about this. My 7-year-old son is upstairs right now with a broken heart, and you're telling me you won't fix it because I don't have $40,000. The woman looked down at her keyboard. I can give you a list of financial assistance programs and emergency funding sources. Some of them have expedited review processes. Keandra stared at her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The clock on the wall ticked, and for the first time in 7 years of fighting, Keandra had no idea what to do next. She walked back upstairs to Malachi's room. She sat down in the plastic chair beside his bed. She took his hand again. Malachi looked up at her. Mama, why are you sad? I'm not sad, baby. I'm just thinking. About what? About how much I love you. Malachi smiled. That wide, bright smile that could light up any room, even a hospital room with beeping machines and fluorescent lights. I love you too, Mama. More than rocket ships. Keandra pressed his hand against her cheek and closed her eyes. 48 hours, $40,000, and a system that would let a child die over paperwork. She had never felt more alone in her life, but she wasn't alone. Because 2 floors up in an office with his name on the door, a phone was ringing. Odessa Monroe picked up on the first ring. She'd been waiting for this moment since the boy came through the emergency room doors. She dialed Clarence before her coffee was even cold. Clarence, it's Odessa, that boy you asked me about. Malachi Carter. He just came in through the ER. Silence on the other end. It's bad, Clarence. His oxygen levels are critical. He collapsed at school this morning. Dr. Patterson is stabilizing him now, but the surgery can't wait. He needs it within 48 hours. More silence. Then Clarence's voice, low and tight. Who's the surgeon on call for pediatric cardiac? Dr. Patterson can do a standard repair, but this case is complex. 4 defects, a 7-year-old's heart. This needs a specialist, Clarence. This needs the best. This needs Denzel. Yes, it does. Clarence was quiet for a long time. Through the phone, Odessa could hear him breathing. She'd known this man for 28 years. She knew what that silence meant. He was making a decision. Set up a meeting with my son, Clarence said finally. Tonight, my office, 8 o'clock. And if he says no, then I'll have to find another way. But he won't say no. Not after he hears what I have to tell him. Clarence hung up. He sat alone in his study at home, looking at the framed photograph on his desk. It was an old picture, black and white, of a woman holding a baby, his mother holding him, taken 2 years before her heart gave out. He picked it up, held it for a long moment. "I'm not going to let this happen again, Mama," he whispered. "Not in my hospital, not on my watch." That evening at 8 o'clock sharp, Denzel walked into his father's office at Drummond Medical Center. He was still in his scrubs. He'd been in surgery until 6:30. A routine valve replacement on a 60-year-old man with excellent insurance. The surgery had gone perfectly. It always did. Denzel's hands never failed him. It was his heart that had gone quiet. Clarence was standing by the window looking out at the Baltimore skyline. He didn't turn around when Denzel came in. "You said it was urgent." "Sit down, son." Denzel sat. He crossed his arms. His body language said everything. He was already defensive. Clarence turned around, and instead of giving an order, instead of pulling rank, instead of doing any of the things Denzel expected, he told a story. He told Denzel about the night it rained, about sitting on a bus stop bench soaked to the bone after the board meeting, about a little boy who tugged on his mother's sleeve and said, "Mama, that man is shaking. Can we help him?" He told him about a woman who took off her only coat and wrapped it around a stranger's shoulders, a woman who was freezing and tired and barely surviving, a woman whose son needed a $220,000 surgery that she couldn't afford. "That woman's son is in this hospital right now," Clarence said. "Room 314, Pediatric Cardiac Unit. Malachi Carter, 7 years old, tetralogy of Fallot. He needs surgery in the next 48 hours or he will die." And the billing department told his mother they can't schedule it without a $40,000 deposit. Denzel's jaw tightened. "Dad, I've heard this before. You can't fix the entire healthcare system by guilt-tripping me into doing free surgeries." "I'm not trying to fix the entire healthcare system. I'm trying to save one boy." "And what about the next one, and the one after that? Where does it stop?" Clarence leaned forward. "When you were 12 years old, you told me you wanted to be a heart surgeon. Do you remember what you said when I asked you why?" Denzel said nothing. "You said, because I want to fix what's broken inside people, Dad. Not just their hearts, everything." Denzel's face flickered. Just for a second, something moved behind his eyes. "That was a kid talking," he said. "The real world doesn't work that way." Then why does a 7-year-old boy have to die because the real world doesn't work that way?" The room went silent. The clock ticked on the wall. Neither of them moved. "You're guilt-tripping me," Denzel said. But his voice had lost its edge. "No, I'm reminding you who you are. You took an oath, Denzel. You stood in front of your professors and your classmates and you swore to do no harm. You swore to put the patient first. Not the billing department, not the board of directors, the patient." "You think I don't know that?" Denzel's voice rose. "You think I don't think about it every single day? I became a doctor to help people, Dad. But this hospital runs on money, and every charity case we take on is another argument with the board. Another fight I have to have. I'm tired of fighting." "Then stop fighting the board," Clarence said quietly, "and start fighting for the boy." Denzel stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the door, put his hand on the handle. "Room 314, he said without turning around. "Room 314. Denzel opened the door and walked out. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. And Clarence sat there, his hands clasped together, hoping that somewhere inside his brilliant, stubborn, broken son, there was still a 12-year-old boy who wanted to fix what was broken. The next morning at 6:15, Denzel walked into Drummond Medical Center through the staff entrance. He told himself he was just going to check the file, review the imaging, see if the case was even operable. He was not going to visit the patient. He was absolutely not going to get emotionally involved. He pulled up Malachi's chart on his tablet. Tetralogy of Fallot, severe. The echocardiogram showed all 4 defects clearly. The ventricular septal defect was large. The pulmonary stenosis was critical. The right ventricular hypertrophy was advanced. And the overriding aorta was positioned exactly where it shouldn't be. It was a complex case, textbook, but complex. Denzel studied the imaging for 20 minutes. He ran the numbers in his head. Surgical approach, bypass time, recovery protocols. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. This was the part of medicine he loved. The puzzle, the precision, the certainty that his skills could make the difference between life and death. Then he made a mistake. He walked past room 314 on his way to the surgical wing, and the door was open. Malachi was awake, sitting up in bed with a crayon in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. The IV line ran from his arm to a bag on a metal pole. The oxygen monitor was clipped to his finger, casting a soft red glow. His lips were still that faint shade of blue that Denzel had seen in hundreds of patients. But he was drawing, tongue poking out the side of his mouth in concentration. Completely absorbed. Keandra sat beside him in the plastic chair, reading from a picture book in a voice that was warm and animated, doing different voices for each character. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but her voice never wavered. Not in front of her son. Malachi looked up and saw Denzel standing in the doorway. His face broke into a grin. "Hi, mister. Are you a doctor? You look like a doctor." Denzel hesitated. He should keep walking. He should review the file from his office. He should not do this. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'm a doctor. Can you fix my heart? Because my heart is broken, like actually broken. Not like in the sad songs." Something cracked inside Denzel, something he'd been holding together with schedules and spreadsheets and board meetings for years. He walked into the room. "I'm Dr. Drummond," he said. "What's your name?" "Malachi. And this is my mama. She's a queen." Keandra looked up, startled. "Malachi. Don't bother the doctor." "He's not bothering me," Denzel said. He pulled up a chair and sat down next to the bed. "So, Malachi, what are you drawing?" Malachi held up the paper proudly. It was a crayon drawing of a woman wearing a large golden crown. She was smiling and had long curly hair. Behind her were stars and what appeared to be a castle. "That's my mama," Malachi said. "I drew her as a queen because she's a queen. She just doesn't know it yet." Denzel looked at the drawing. Then he looked at Keandra, who was pressing her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry. And he looked back at Malachi, 7 years old, blue lips, broken heart, drawing his mother as royalty in a hospital bed, because he didn't know how else to tell her she was everything. "That's a really good drawing," Denzel said. His voice was thick. "You can have it if you want," Malachi offered. "I can make another one for Mama." "I'd like that. Thank you, Malachi." Denzel stayed for 15 minutes. He listened to Malachi talk about rocket ships and his favorite cartoon and the dog he wanted to get when he was bigger. He watched the boy's oxygen levels on the monitor. He watched how Keandra held her son's hand the entire time without ever letting go. He noticed the housekeeping uniform she was still wearing, the name tag, the shoes that were worn down at the heels from standing all day. When he left the room, he stood in the hallway for a long moment, alone, holding a crayon drawing of a queen. Then he went to find Keandra. She was standing at the vending machine at the end of the hall, staring at the options but not buying anything. She couldn't afford to waste $1. "Miss Carter," she turned around. "I'm Dr. Denzel Drummond. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon. I've reviewed your son's case and his imaging. His condition is serious, but it's operable. I want to perform his surgery." Keandra's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Hope, confusion, fear. "I appreciate that, doctor. I really do. But I've already been told, without $40,000. They won't schedule the procedure, and I don't have it. I've tried everything." Denzel looked at her. This woman who worked 2 jobs, who gave her coat to a stranger in the rain, who was standing in a hospital hallway in a housekeeping uniform trying to save her son's life. "I didn't ask about payment," he said. "I asked if you'd let me save your son." Keandra blinked. "What?" The surgery. I'll do it. Tomorrow morning. No deposit, no billing department. Just me, my team, and your son. I don't understand. Why? Why would you do this? Denzel was quiet for a moment. He thought about his father's face last night. He thought about the oath he'd taken. He thought about a 12-year-old boy who once wanted to fix everything that was broken. Because someone reminded me why I became a doctor, Keandra stared at him. Her chin trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. So, she just nodded, over and over, nodding through the tears. Thank you, she finally managed. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I do, Denzel said softly, and he meant it. Then Keandra stopped. Something clicked behind her eyes. Drummond. Your name is Drummond, like the hospital. Yes, my father built this place. Keandra looked at him for a long moment. Something flickered across her face. A shadow of recognition. A question forming, but it didn't fully take shape. Not yet. Your father must be a good man, she said. Denzel thought about his father sitting alone in his office, begging his son to remember who he was. He is, Denzel said quietly. He really is. The surgery was scheduled for 6 o'clock in the morning. Keandra was up at 4 o'clock. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the night in the plastic chair next to Malachi's bed, watching his chest rise and fall, counting breaths the way she'd done 1,000 times before. But tonight was different. Tonight might be the last time she had to count. At 5:15, 2 nurses came in to prep Malachi. They were gentle, kind. One of them had a warm smile and spoke to Malachi like he was the most important person in the building, because right now he was. Malachi was groggy, but awake. They put him in a small hospital gown with tiny blue stars on it. He looked so small in that gown, so fragile, like a bird with a broken wing. Mama, I'm right here, baby. When I wake up, will my heart be fixed? Keandra knelt beside the bed. She took his face in both hands and looked straight into his eyes. Yes, baby. When you wake up, you'll be able to run as fast as you want. No more sitting out at recess. No more getting tired on the stairs. You're going to run, Malachi, as fast as the wind. He smiled, that wide, beautiful smile. Faster than Jalen. Way faster than Jalen. He giggled, then his face got serious. Mama, are you scared? A little bit. Don't be. The doctor with the nice voice said he's going to take care of me. And I believe him. Keandra kissed his forehead, held it there, let herself breathe him in. The smell of hospital soap and little boy sweat and something sweet underneath that was just Malachi. I love you more than anything in this world, she whispered. I love you more than rocket ships, Mama. The nurses wheeled him away at 5:45. Keandra walked beside the gurney, holding his hand, until they reached the double doors that said, Surgical Unit, Authorized Personnel Only. The nurse touched her arm gently. This is as far as you can go, Miss Carter. We'll take good care of him. Malachi waved. See you when I wake up, Mama. The doors swung shut, and Keandra stood there staring at those doors, her hand still reaching out for a hand that was no longer there. Rashida found her like that 5 minutes later. She wrapped her arms around her daughter and held on tight. Neither of them said a word. They just stood there in the hallway, holding each other, while somewhere behind those doors, a team of surgeons prepared to open a 7-year-old boy's chest and fix what had been broken since the day he was born. The waiting room was on the 3rd floor. Small beige walls, plastic chairs, a television mounted in the corner playing the morning news on mute, a vending machine humming in the hallway, a clock on the wall with a second hand that seemed to move slower than any clock Keandra had ever seen. They sat down. Rashida pulled out a pair of knitting needles and a ball of yellow yarn from her bag. She started knitting, not because she needed a scarf, because her hands needed something to do. If they were still, they would shake. At 7:30, Odessa came in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Keandra and one in front of Rashida. "How are you holding up, baby?" Odessa asked. Keandra looked at the coffee. She couldn't imagine drinking anything right now. Her stomach was a fist. "What are they doing to him in there?" Rashida asked quietly. "Can you explain it to me in words I can understand?" Odessa sat down beside her. "Right now they've got Malachi on a heart-lung bypass machine. That means a machine is doing the work of his heart and lungs while the surgeons operate. Dr. Drummond is going to close the hole between the 2 lower chambers of Malachi's heart. Then, he'll widen the pathway to the lungs so more blood can get through. He'll repair the pulmonary valve so it opens and closes properly. And he'll reposition the aorta so it draws blood from the right place. 4 things, Rashida said. They're fixing 4 things at once." "Yes, ma'am. 4 defects, 1 surgery. It usually takes between 5 and 7 hours. Rashida nodded slowly. Her knitting needles never stopped moving. Click, click, click. "And after?" Keandra asked. "If it works?" "When it works," Odessa corrected gently. "He'll be in the ICU for a few days, then recovery, physical therapy. But if everything goes well, in a few months that boy will be running around like he was born brand new." Keandra closed her eyes. She pressed her palms together in her lap and she prayed silently. The way her mother had taught her, the way her grandmother had taught her mother. 1 hour passed, 2 hours, 3. Keandra paced back and forth across the small waiting room. 12 steps one way, 12 steps back. Her shoes made a soft sound on the linoleum floor. Back and forth, back and forth. Rashida knitted. The yellow yarn grew into something shapeless and beautiful. Her lips moved silently. Prayers or counting stitches? Maybe both. At 10 o'clock, a nurse came out. "He's doing well. Dr. Drummond is closing the septal defect now. Everything is on track." Keandra nodded. She couldn't speak. 4 hours, 5 hours. The vending machine hummed. The clock ticked. A nurse's shoes squeaked in the hallway. Someone paged a doctor over the intercom. The world kept moving, but in that waiting room, time had stopped. 2 floors above, in his office, Clarence Drummond sat at his desk. His computer screen showed the security camera feed from the 3rd-floor waiting room. He watched Keandra pace. He watched Rashida knit. He watched Odessa sit with them, patient and steady as a lighthouse. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Clarence Drummond cried. Not for the hospital, not for the board, not for himself. He cried for a mother who gave her coat to a stranger, and a boy who drew queens with crayons, and a world that made it so hard for good people to survive. He cried because his son was downstairs right now doing the thing he was born to do, saving a life. Not for money, not for the board, for a child, the way it was always supposed to be. At 12:17 in the afternoon, 6 hours and 32 minutes after the surgery began, the double doors opened. Denzel walked out. He was still in his surgical gown. His mask was pulled down around his neck. His eyes were tired, but clear. Keandra stopped pacing. Rashida put down her needles. The room went completely still. "Miss Carter." Keandra couldn't breathe. "The surgery was successful. We repaired all 4 defects. His heart is beating on its own, strong and steady. Malachi is going to be okay." For a moment, nothing happened. The words hung in the air like they needed time to become real. Then Keandra's knees buckled. Rashida caught her, and they held each other, sobbing, right there in the middle of that beige waiting room with the muted television and the humming vending machine, crying so hard that a nurse passing by in the hallway stopped and pressed her hand to her chest. Keandra pulled away from her mother and reached for Denzel's hand. She took it in both of hers and held it tight. "Thank you," she said, her voice broken and beautiful. "Thank you for giving my son a chance." Denzel looked at her, and something in his face was different, softer, more open. like a window that had been shut for years had finally cracked open. "He gave me something too," Denzel said quietly. "He reminded me why this work matters." Odessa stood in the corner, watching. She didn't say a word. She just smiled and wiped her eyes. An hour later, they let Keandra into the ICU. Malachi was asleep. Tubes ran from his arms and chest. An oxygen line sat beneath his nose. Wires connected him to a monitor that beeped softly with each heartbeat. But this time the rhythm was different. It was steady, even, strong. For the first time in 7 years, Malachi Carter's heart was beating the way it was supposed to. Keandra sat beside him. She took his small hand in hers. She didn't speak. She just listened to the beep. 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 That steady, beautiful beep. The sound of her son's heart, finally whole. 3 days later, Malachi was sitting up in bed, eating orange jello and complaining that the hospital gown was itchy. His color was better. His lips were pink. Actually pink. Keandra kept staring at them, amazed, like she was seeing her son for the first time. That afternoon, a nurse came in and told Keandra that someone wanted to meet her. A donor who had covered the full cost of Malachi's surgery. A donor. Keandra frowned. "I didn't know anyone was paying for this. I thought Dr. Drummond arranged it through the hospital. The benefactor would like to explain in person. Conference room B, 4th floor, whenever you're ready." Keandra kissed Malachi's forehead, told Rashida to stay with him, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. She smoothed down her hair, straightened her clothes. She was still wearing the same jeans and sweater she'd been living in for 3 days. She pushed open the door to conference room B. A man sat at the far end of the table. He was wearing a dark blue suit, perfectly pressed silver cufflinks. His white hair was neatly combed. He had deep brown eyes, and when he looked up at her, those eyes held something complicated. Gratitude, guilt, hope. Keandra recognized him instantly. "You," she whispered. "You're the man from the bus stop." Clarence Drummond stood up slowly. "Yes, and I owe you an explanation." Keandra didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway, her hand still on the door handle, like she might need to leave at any moment.
My name is Clarence Drummond. I'm the founder of this hospital.
The room tilted. Keandra felt like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. "That night at the bus stop," Clarence continued, "I wasn't pretending to be someone I'm not. I was at the lowest point of my life. I just walked out of a board meeting where my own son, my own flesh and blood, told me that saving this hospital's mission wasn't worth the financial cost. I was angry. I was heartbroken. I walked out into the rain because I didn't know where else to go." He paused, and then a little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and asked if they could help me. Keandra's jaw tightened. She was listening, but her eyes were guarded. "You gave me your coat, your only coat, in December, in the rain, and you didn't know who I was. You didn't know I could do anything for you. You just saw a man who was cold, and you helped him." "What happened after that?" Keandra asked, her voice steady. "I found out who you were. I found out about Malachi, about his condition, and I discovered that my hospital, the hospital I built to serve families like yours, had turned your son away because of a billing policy." "You arranged all of this," Keandra said. Not a question, a statement. "The surgery, Denzel, all of it. I asked my son to do what he was trained to do, what he was called to do. But Keandra, I didn't make him care. He walked into that room and saw your son, and something changed in him. That was real." Keandra was quiet for a long time. She walked to the window and looked out at the Baltimore skyline, the harbor, the buildings, the streets where she'd spent her whole life struggling. "I'm grateful," she said finally. "I'll be grateful every day for the rest of my life that my son is alive, that his heart is beating, that he's going to grow up." She turned around. "But, Mr. Drummond, what about the next mother? The one who doesn't happen to give her coat to a billionaire? The one sitting in that waiting room right now with the same bills I had, and no one who knows her name. What happens to her? The question landed on Clarence like a stone dropped into still water. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because she was right, and he knew it. That, Clarence said quietly, is exactly what I've been asking myself, and I think I finally have an answer. 1 week later, Clarence called an emergency meeting of the Drummond Medical Center Board of Directors. Every seat at the long conference table was filled. Denzel sat to his father's right. For the first time in years, they were on the same side of the table. Clarence stood at the head of the room. He didn't use notes. He didn't use a presentation. He just spoke. 40 years ago, I built this hospital because my mother died of a heart condition that could have been treated if our family had money. I stood on the front steps on opening day, and I made a promise. This hospital will never turn away a child. I broke that promise. The room was silent. 3 weeks ago, a 7-year-old boy collapsed at his school because his heart was failing. His mother had called this hospital 4 times begging for help. 4 times she was told to come back when she had $40,000. That boy almost died. Not because medicine failed him, because we failed him. He looked around the table. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Malachi Fund, named after that boy. This fund will cover the full cost of cardiac surgery for any child under 18 who cannot afford treatment, regardless of their insurance status. It will be funded by allocating 15% of the hospital's annual operating surplus. Murmurs around the table. A board member in a gray suit leaned forward. Clarence, 15% of the surplus, that's millions of dollars a year. The shareholders won't agree to that. Che, then I'll buy them out, Clarence said calmly. Every single share with my personal assets, and I'll convert this hospital to a fully nonprofit institution. I've already had my lawyers draw up the paperwork. Silence. Denzel stood up. Every eye in the room turned to him. I've spent 15 years fixing hearts on operating tables, Denzel said. I'm one of the best cardiac surgeons in this country, but I've been so focused on the science that I forgot about the people. A 7-year-old boy reminded me, and his mother reminded me. He paused. I'm committing to performing 2 pro bono surgeries per month through the Malachi Fund, and I'm asking every surgeon in this hospital to consider doing the same. He looked at his father. Clarence looked back, and between them, something that had been broken for a very long time began to heal. The board voted reluctantly, 11-3 in favor. After the meeting, Clarence asked Keandra to come to his office. I have a proposition for you, he said. This hospital needs a patient advocate, someone whose job it is to help families navigate the system, to make sure no mother sits in that waiting room alone, drowning in paperwork and fear. The position pays $62,000 a year with full benefits, health, dental, vision. I want you to take it. Keandra stared at him. You want me to work here, at the hospital? I want you to do here what you already do everywhere else. Take care of people. Mr. Drummond, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I clean hotel rooms and wait tables. You're a mother who fought the entire healthcare system to save her son. You understand what these families go through because you've lived it. There's no degree in the world that teaches that. Patient advocacy is one of the fastest growing roles in American healthcare. The Affordable Care Act expanded coverage, but millions of families still fall through the gaps. They need someone on their side, someone who speaks their language, someone who has been where they are. Keandra was quiet. Why me? She asked. Because when you sat in that waiting room, terrified and alone, you swore you'd find a way, and you did. I want you to help other mothers find their way, too. Keandra thought about it for a long time. She thought about the hotel rooms, the restaurant shifts, the bills that never stopped coming. She thought about Malachi upstairs in his hospital bed, drawing pictures of rocket ships and queens. And she thought about the woman in the billing office, the one in the beige blazer who had looked at her computer screen and said, Without a deposit of at least $40,000, we can't schedule the surgery at this time. And how in that moment, Keandra had felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. "I'll do it," she said, "not because of the money, because I know what it feels like to sit in that waiting room alone, and no one should have to feel that." Clarence smiled, a real smile, the kind that came from somewhere deep. "Welcome to Drummond Medical Center, Keandra." 1 year later, Malachi Carter was 8 years old, and he was running. Not jogging, not walking fast, running. Full speed, arms pumping, legs flying, across the schoolyard at Barkley Elementary. Chasing Jalen Thompson in a race that he had been waiting his entire life to run. He crossed the finish line first. He threw his hands in the air. He wasn't even out of breath. Miss Tanya stood on the sideline, pressing her hand to her mouth. She remembered the day he'd collapsed in her classroom. She remembered calling 911. She remembered thinking she might never see that smile again. But here he was, smiling wider than ever, alive, whole, running. Across town, Keandra stood in the hallway of Drummond Medical Center. She was wearing a navy blue blazer and a name badge that said, "Patient Advocate." Her hair was pulled back neatly, her shoes were new. In front of her, a young woman sat in a plastic chair, crying. She was holding a stack of medical bills in her hands and a referral letter for her daughter's cardiac surgery. The numbers on the paperwork were overwhelming. The fear on her face was familiar. Keandra knelt down in front of her. She took the woman's hands. "I know exactly how you feel," Keandra said, "and I'm going to help you through this. Every step, you are not alone." The woman looked up at her, hope breaking through the tears. In its first year, the Malachi Fund had provided full surgical funding for 47 children. 47 families who would have been turned away. 47 kids who got to run again. Denzel performed 2 pro bono surgeries every month. He started a mentorship program for young surgeons, teaching them that medicine was about more than precision. It was about people. He and Clarence had dinner together every Sunday night now. They didn't always agree, but they always showed up. Clarence still took walks through East Baltimore. Not in disguise. Not to test anyone. He walked because it kept him honest, because it reminded him that the world looked different from a bus stop bench than it did from a 14th floor office. And every time he passed that particular bench on Eastern Avenue, the one where he'd sat shivering in the rain, he smiled, because that bench was where everything changed. That evening, Keandra came home from work. She opened the front door of the small house she'd been able to rent in a better neighborhood. Clean, bright, 2 bedrooms, a yard where Malachi could run. "Mama!" Malachi slammed into her legs like a small tornado. She scooped him up and held him tight. He smelled like grass and sweat and boy. His cheeks were flushed from running. His lips were pink. Beautifully, perfectly pink. "I beat Jalen today," he said, "by a lot. I'm so proud of you, baby." She carried him inside and set him down. He ran off to his room to draw, and as Keandra hung up her coat by the door, her eyes landed on the wall above the couch. There, in a simple wooden frame, hung a crayon drawing. A woman with curly hair wearing a large golden crown, stars behind her, a castle in the background, and at the bottom in wobbly 7-year-old handwriting, the words, "My mama, she's a queen. She just doesn't know it yet." Keandra stood there for a moment, looking at that drawing, and she thought about everything that had happened. A cold night, a shivering man, a $12 coat, a broken heart that got fixed, a system that got changed, a life that got saved. Not just Malachi's, hers too, and Clarence's and Denzel's and 47 other families who would never know about the night it all started. She hadn't given away a coat that night. She'd given away a piece of herself, and somehow the world gave everything back. From down the hall, Malachi called out, "Mama, come look. I'm drawing a new one. It's you and me and rocket ships." Keandra wiped her eyes. She smiled and she went to her son. Thank you for watching. If this story touches you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save a life you didn't even know was in danger. Love you all. Great. Wow. Just wow. I'm still processing that one. How did that story land with you? What part really hit home?
I'm so curious to know where you're all watching from today. Drop a comment and let me know what city or what part of the world you're in right now. It's incredible to think we're all connected through this story from all over the place.
From the bottom of my heart, I'm sending so much love out to you and your family. I truly hope you are all staying safe and finding peace in your corner of the world.
And hey, you guys always have the most amazing life experiences. If this story sparked a memory, or if you have an incredible, wild, or just beautiful true story of your own you'd be willing to share, please leave it in the comments. I genuinely love reading them, and I know others will too. If you felt a connection here today, hitting that like button helps more people find our community. And if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe and be part of the next one.
All right, take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the comments.